Hello, everybody. Welcome to our interview with
Richard Rhodes.
Father Richard, one of the greatest people that I've ever met in my life.
Yes. Long time pastor here at Grace Chapel. 36 years. Although at his retirement party, everyone talked about 37 years.
No, I think some people tacked on me. I don't think he liked that.
He didn't like that.
Yeah, he was clear.
To be clear, it's 36,
36 years.
We both have had the chance to work with Richard.
Yeah.
We love Richard. I've known Richard for 18 years.
Wow.
How long have you known Richard?
I've known him for 7 years. And he was actually the Lexington interim campus pastor while I was still working in our Lexington campus.
Yeah.
And his leadership, I love the guy.
Yes.
I was going to share a quick story of Richard. One of the times we were doing, it was actually during COVID, he was our intern campus pastor, and we had an event, which some of you guys watching might have been there for, where at Lexington, we did like a huge light show where we had a reenactment and we had lasers, and it was like this whole big production. And for some reason, you weren't there. I think we were calling. You were not there for it.
Not there.
But all these cars were driving through, and this is a time when people weren't allowed to be in buildings. So during that time, I remember it was pouring rain while we were doing this light show, and then all of a sudden the power went out. And so we're like, Dom, go back there and fix what's going on. So Dom, who is one of our coworkers, he's like, okay. Then he goes to the back, and all of our wires are just exposed in this pouring rain. And then he's this brand new to our team, so he's like, all right, I guess this is what I gotta do. And we're just like, all right, can you fix it, Dom? Dom's like, oh, please, Lord, please don't electrocute me. And he plugs the thing in and just expecting to get shocked out of his mind. But thank the Lord he didn't. But I love that event because we put on this whole thing, even though there was COVID, because he just loves seeing people and loves being with people. And so every car that drove by, we were able to see them, acknowledge them, and love them. And that's the kind of person Richard is, and that's the kind of person I'll remember him for. Anything that you might remember?
I mean, there's so many stories. We talk about more meaningful ones in our conversation we had with him. But we had the chance just before COVID to go on a retreat that he sort of thought we needed to do some team building, and he arranged for our whole Lexington team to go up to a house of someone who goes to Grace Chapel. They have a beautiful house up in Vermont. And you weren't there.
Yeah, I think I COVID that day. I couldn't make
Somehow
it.
you missed that. Uh-huh. But, sometimes like a work away thing, it's like, I don't know, is it good? And Richard was just so detail oriented in the way that he set up the whole weekend. Obviously, there's just so many dynamics going on relationally and team-wise and whatnot. But I think the guy went to Costco. He got all this special food. He just had a whole itinerary for the weekend, had packed everything. It was like super camp dad kind of vibes. Then I was like, man, Richard can do it all, dagnabbit.
Yeah, it's like anytime we go, it's like you got to go to the grocery store because you forgot like 10 million things.
He forgot nothing.
No,
he literally forgot nothing. Yeah. He had a whole menu planned. It was honestly really impressive. Well, the guy's amazing.
Yeah, it's one of the many reasons we miss Richard, but we're also so happy for his retirement.
Yes.
So if you're watching, Richard, we love you. We miss you.
Love you, Richard.
Hope you're doing well, enjoying the California sun. But I hope that you guys enjoy this conversation that we got to have with Richard, because I think it's really meaningful. Yeah. We learn a lot about his story, what makes him him.
Yeah.
That twinkle in his eyes. What gives him that. So I'm excited for you guys to listen in to this conversation.
Yes. We hope you enjoy the conversation.
Well, we're losing content right now. This is for
They're recording.
We are?
Yeah.
Oh, are we recording? Are we good to go?
We're good to go. We got it.
Boom. All right.
I feel like it's exhausting to say goodbye. Like I feel like I would have the temptation to do the Irish goodbye a little bit just to like.
Well, if I wasn't such a big closure person, needing closure, but it is emotionally exhausting.
Yeah.
I mean, Dory and I last night we are just so worn out.
Yes.
Because you're saying goodbye. You're trying to set everything up for the future. I'm trying to set the 5 teams I work with on our, projected year of strategic plan.
Yeah, you're doing work for like the next year right now.
It's like, oh gosh, like I'm going on vacation, not coming back. Yeah. So, but it's also been very rewarding.
That's good.
Just to be with people I've loved.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot of It's a lot of years of relationship.
Uh-huh.
And I imagine that I was just talking last night with Andrew about he was like, what do you think has kept you at Grace Chapel?
Kept you.
Me.
Oh.
And I was like, what do you think? I don't know. And he's like, I think the relationships.
Oh gosh, yes. Totally.
Do you feel like that's the same
for you?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's the rewarding part of it, and doing things as a team.
Yeah.
I could never have survived if I was by myself.
Yeah.
I just would have hated it. Like every day.
So we have with us today Richard Rhodes, an American historian, journalist, and author of the Pulitzer Prize winning The Making of the Atomic Bomb and also The Erotic Odyssey.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. I know all those books were important.
So you're familiar with the...
You're familiar with the other Richard Rhodes.
Richard Rhodes. The other...
A funny story. So Doug Whalen, who was a good pastor and friend, son came to him one day and said, Dad, Pastor Richard has written a book. And he brought the title of this book. And Doug, red-faced, had to explain, no, that's not our Richard Rhodes. There's another Richard Rhodes. So he
was the original Richard Rhodes, by the way.
He was the original.
And he's the only well-known one. So anyway, and obviously so.
We have the better one, though. To be clear.
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah, we're gonna have to throw out all the notes we have for today because that's the one I prepared for. I prepared for an interview. The author
of course.
Yeah, okay.
Of course.
That's good.
That was
That's really
fun.
good.
I hadn't thought about that guy in a while.
Richard Rhodes. Okay, so the real Richard Rhodes, Richard Rhodes.
That's me.
That's you. So I the most recent fun memory I have of you, Richard. So we worked together a lot of years.
Yeah.
But was what you just walked down here saying to start, like, oh man, Leah, I remember just last year seeing you sitting producing this attic story. So we did a short story for our Christmas Eve, and we did it at no other than Richard Rhodes' house, and shot in the attic. And I mean, we have a lot of funny memories from that. We were there very late. And I have a great video of you coming in saying goodnight to us in your little white, just let yourself out, turn the lights off.
I don't think you knew we were going to be there that late, Richard.
The funny thing about that incident was, I just love the thought that you wanted to film this Christmas thing in our attic, because I'm an organizational freak.
Well, I was going to go there.
Anyway, so I just thought, oh, wow, they'll get to see my attic.
You wanted to show it off.
I did want to show it off.
Yes.
But mainly to you guys. Yeah. Okay. And Dory said, so they want to shoot something in our attic? And I said, yeah. And they said, well, they're just using our attic, right? And I said, oh, yeah. And she said, how many are coming? And I said, I think just 2 or 3. And so you guys pull up with massive trucks, and you come in with these and you had these huge bins, and like 12
bins.
12 of you descended, and Dory goes, oh my word, I've got to clean the kitchen. I've got to do this. Because I said,
by the way, we're going to shoot in the kitchen.
I know. I said, so you're just using the attic. And Leah, you said, no, actually, we were wondering if we could use the kitchen, and then can we use the hallway, and can we shoot from outside? And Dory did a little panic, like she was cleaning that. It was such a great experience for us, because we got to order pizza and sit around with you guys. And
well, I feel like that's such a good little, like, in a nutshell, so much was revealed about you and Dory and your family, and just your generosity and open handedness and open hearts to everyone and anyone. and you picked up on so we like did it. When we came for the test run at the attic, it was like, we were like, wow, this is so organized. And so I feel like there's like 2 things, one, your hospitality was revealed, which makes me wonder, like, my goodness, how did you, like, New England's not necessarily known for being so hospitable. So all of these years that you guys have lived in New England, and still that just oozes out of you, and your impulse for organization and, being in an institution like a church is not necessarily known for, being the most tidy in multiple, metaphorically and maybe literally sometimes. And it made me wonder a little bit also about, you have something.
You go on.
Well, I'm like, where I'm like the origin story of Richard. Where did these characteristics begin? And how have they lasted?
Well, side note to that, the premise of that whole attic shoot was we were going to go to a messy attic. And so surely everyone in the world's got a messy attic.
No,
and we found the one attic in this entire country that is perfectly, we're like, we have to, I didn't think we would have to messy up and unorganized.
Well, that's what we had to bring in bins.
We had to bring in
as props.
Because it was too organized.
You didn't tell me that when you asked. I just got this from Dave. He sends an email to the whole staff. Anybody, can we use your attic? And I'm like, sure, you can use my attic. I didn't know you wanted it messy.
It ended up being great. It was great. And it was so organized to the point of, you have all them labeled, your kids' names and whatnot. I think there actually was a Maddie box.
Yes, there is.
Which is your dog.
Yeah.
To this day.
Yeah.
May rest in peace.
Yes.
Maddie.
Yes. Yeah, little Maddie.
Doggy heaven.
To this day, Dave thinks that Maddie is your dog, like a child. It's Maddie's old clothes.
Our daughter Haley will love hearing that. Sorry, Haley, if you're listening. No, you're not Maddie. Okay.
All right, well, Richard, give us a little bit.
So the organizational piece, the kids laugh and enjoy this part of me. I just love organizing things. And so, just to give you an example, Boston Project, you've been probably down there. They have this huge house and they have this basement, and you cannot even walk in that basement. And I said to Paul, Malcolm is the director, I said, can you just let me at it? Just let me at that. And
wow.
And Dory always says, my wife, she says, I don't know how you can picture how it goes or that you're not so overwhelmed. I just love organizing. So I did 3 straight days in that basement.
Oh my goodness.
We took everything out, and I got Paul to throw away half of it because it was junk, and then organized the rest of it.
Wow.
And it was so much fun. So I love bringing order out of chaos. And I've always sort of enjoyed like packing the car and, I like that sense that everything's out of whack, and then you sort of just can bring it back to an efficient order.
This could be a second career after.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Get your own Netflix show, Marie Kondo's.
Marie Kondo,
yeah, Richard.
That's right.
The Richard Rhodes
closet
method.
organizer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as Leah was saying, can you tell us a little bit? Because I was always under the impression that you were born in North Carolina, but is that true or not true? I guess I don't even know.
No.
Tell us a little bit about
I was born in New
born
Orleans.
Oh.
And just kept moving north. So we lived in Atlanta. My dad's he's passed away 3 years ago. He was a physician and did his training in the Navy, and then Atlanta. And then he moved and started his medical practice in Eastern North Carolina. So, and then I moved all over the state. So I grew up through high school in Eastern North Carolina near Raleigh, North Carolina, and then went to Wake Forest in the western part of the state, then worked with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship in Chapel Hill for 5 years, then came to seminary. And so I just kept working my way up north.
Seminary up here.
Yeah, seminary at Gordon Conwell Seminary.
So growing up, Richard, what kind of kid were you when you're thinking about all the different types of kids that we have? Kind of, the one who's the class clown, or the one who's Mr. Popular, Mrs. Popular. How would you kind of categorize yourself a little bit?
If you saw pictures of me, I was this skinny, just so skinny I could touch my ribs.
Oh, really?
On both sides. I was really skinny. And when I got married 37 years ago, I weighed 145 pounds. So I was just very skinny. Love sports.
Okay.
Played all three sports: football, basketball, baseball, and I was the middle child, so I was sort of the peacemaker. And I remember my dad saying early on that he thought I had a warm personality.
Even when you were young?
When I was young, and that I loved to laugh and could make people laugh. And I remember that comment just stood out to me as very formative. Like, really? Oh, that's good. So I became known in the family as the one that would go behind the stage and talk to the people in the show, or I just would talk to about anybody. And that it was kind of who I felt I wanted to be. So I think that the friendliness that I feel is probably, originated from my dad making a comment, which was pretty formative, huh?
How old do you think you were?
Oh, I was 12.
Wow.
And I thought, oh gosh, I actually have something to contribute here.
Yeah.
Because at that stage, you're just sort of wondering if you're, what you're going to be like and who you are. And so that was very, very formative for me.
And so you were the middle of.
I have a brother who's 2 years older and a brother who's 2 years younger.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
3 boys.
Yeah.
They're kind of like the 2-2-2, right?
Yeah. 2-2-2. Yeah.
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 The age difference.
3 boys. Yeah.
That's a lot.
Wow.
And we all played sports. We all played sports together. And so that was a really fun upbringing because we were very active. We were always outside. Yeah. And it was a warm home. It was great. My dad was gone all the time. It was medical practice early on, but then he made some changes and we got to be with him a lot more. So that was good.
Wow. So did you guys go to church growing up?
That's a great question. I hated church. I literally it was the worst hour of my week because it was just so dang boring. And I remember trying to just stay awake for the whole hour. In fact, that was my goal. If I could just stay awake the whole hour.
They didn't have like youth groups or anything like that,
no,
right?
We had a youth group, but the youth group was pretty wild. I remember it was a church that was rather liberal in its theology, and we kind of went early on because my dad thought it'd be good to have it on his resume. All the in the South, there's churches like this where you have to go to church if you want to be respected in town. And he was not a Christian at the time, and so we went to this church, and it was just very boring. There was a youth group, but the police would come around often for youth group night and have to police us.
Wow, you weren't kidding about the rowdiness.
Yeah,
wow.
It got out of control a few times. But so that's not where I felt like I heard about a relationship with Christ. It was much more of a, go to church kind of thing.
Yeah. So trace that on a little bit.
Yeah. So my mom was the first one in our family that became a Christian. And fast forward to 2 weeks ago, we had a family reunion, 25 of us. All 25 from my side of the family went to our river cottage in North Carolina. People flew in, people drove in because this might be our last time with our mom because she's 94 and very frail. And if you could have been there to see this, each family would migrate to her easy chair and kneel down beside her and tell her with great gratitude that they were Christians because of her. And we were able to just bless her. And she cried. And it was just very, very, very holy, to have that opportunity with your mom while she's still living. And for her to see, we have this picture of us all around her chair, 25 of us, and we're all believers because of her. So she became a Christian first
Wow.
as an adult after they had been married for a few years. She got really depressed because she had these 3 small children underfoot, and she grew up very wealthy. So she like had a butler and somebody to drive her to school, and so she didn't know how to cook. She was overwhelmed. She had these 3 little boys. Her husband was gone all the time, and someone gave her a book by Billy Graham called Peace with God. And she read it, and she gave her life to Christ. And she really didn't quite know what had happened to her. She knew something had happened. And so she went to this church and said, what should I do? And they said, well, we have a Bible study. So she joined the Bible study, and that's where she learned what had happened to her. And then she drove my dad crazy for 10 years trying to convert him. And then he had an initial experience with God when he was a teenager. And I just think that sort of the medicine had derailed him in some ways or distracted him. So he wasn't opposed to God so much, although he did tell my mom that she couldn't read the Bible to us anymore because his quote was, I'm going to put a ribbon in their hair and call them girls if you keep reading the Bible to them.
Oh, wow.
So the Lord finally got through to her, just love him. Don't try to convert him.
Yeah.
Because I remember at the dinner table, she would drive him up the wall. Anyway, so she backed off, loved him, and he became, oh gosh, so on fire for God. Oh gosh, it was embarrassing to me as a kid sometimes. We'd have all this wealthy family, at a social event, everybody's drinking their toddies. And he would say, I think we should all gather in a circle and hold hands and pray. I'm like, no. So he really, I've gotten off track here. But anyway, he really became very much on fire for God. And so the 2 of them influenced us.
Wow.
To come to faith. So he wasn't quite a believer at this point, but they sent me to a Christian athletic camp. They sent all 3 of us to this athletic camp that was Christian. My dad, because it was athletic, my mom, because it was Christian. And that's where we were introduced to Christ.
Wow. So it was a 10-year journey for your dad. Mm-hmm. And how old were you when your mom first had that?
Oh, we were like, I was 5.
You were
probably.
young. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever go to a crusade, a Billy Graham crusade? Did you guys ever end up?
It's interesting, this Christian athletic camp, the first day of camp, I got in a fight with Billy Graham's son.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
I did.
Wait, at this camp?
At this Christian athletic camp, because Billy Graham sent his kids there.
Okay.
And Cliff Barrows, Ned.
Uh-huh.
He was.
What was the fight about?
Oh, I mean, a fight when you're 12 or 13 was, more like pushing each other down on the ground, and you got
into a fight with Billy Graham's son.
Yeah. Isn't that great? That's my I claim to fame.
That's a good one.
That is a good one.
He had such a chip on his shoulder. Mm-hmm. I mean, can you imagine growing up as Billy Graham's son?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Those that are listening to this might not even know who Billy Graham is, but he was pretty well known.
Yeah.
And anyway,
like the most important evangelist of our time.
Yes. Wow,
that's incredible.
Yeah.
So then so you were about 12, you said, when you went to that camp. Yeah. Was that an important moment in your journey?
At that camp, there were these athletes that played college ball and could bench press 300 pounds and would get up and give their testimony. And it just had a big impact. So that's where I initially made a decision to embrace a relationship with Jesus, was through the influence of that camp.
Which was sounds like it was around the same time that your dad made that really formative comment to you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So did you go then when you went to school? What were you wanting to do and study when you were trying to figure out your?
I wasn't quite sure. I I thought this is really, I thought I wanted to be a dentist. I don't need to get into that.
Yeah.
And then my freshman year, I had 2 D's and 2 C's in the sciences. And I realized
I wouldn't have wanted you as my dentist. No.
And it's crazy that I even wanted to do that. I just had a great dentist growing up, and I kind of wanted to be like that. But then I thought I would teach, so I was certified to teach.
Mm.
It was college, though, that my Sunday school faith really fell apart.
Mm.
The first week of school, my RA came into my room, and he saw I had a Bible on the desk, and he says, "You don't believe that book, do you?"
Mm.
And I said, "Well, yeah, kind of." And he said, "Well, it's not even true." And he took in an hour, he had completely destroyed what little faith I had.
Mm.
And and that sent me on a 1.5 year real search for meaning, purpose. Is there any religion that makes sense? And I studied the world religions and the world religious leaders, and looked at them and tried to see if there was anything unique about them, or was religion just a man-made deal? So I guess I'm getting off a little bit, but I started with this.
But that wasn't your major, right?
No,
I was just about to say you did that on your own time as a college student.
I did that as
That's pretty significant.
Yeah, because so what I guess what I was saying, my train of thought was that I had this initial experience with Jesus, and then I call that a Sunday school faith. So when I got to college, it got destroyed.
Yeah.
And so I went on this long search.
Mm.
But study-wise, what I was doing was being certified to teach school. So I got certified to teach
At Wake Forest.
At Wake Forest. And then I did my student teaching, and I thought, man, this is the most demanding job ever.
Richard, is a pastor allowed to root for a team called the Demon Deacons? Or is that, I don't know if you're allowed to do that.
Well, you've done your research.
Yeah.
It's an oxymoron. We understand.
Because I think the school itself has like some sort of Baptist or roots, right?
Yeah. It started as a Baptist school.
Uh-huh. Now they're the Demon Deacons.
I know.
Richard.
How can you? I think the deacon part was just a little too religious for some people, and so they had to throw some demonic word in there.
Sure.
The Demon Deacons, I know. Well, I mean, Duke's the Blue Devils.
Yeah, what is it? What is it over there in North Carolina, Richard?
A lot of.
Wait, was there that kind of intense rivalry in North Carolina even then? Okay.
So I told our kids, you can look at, there are a lot of great schools in the South when they were looking at colleges. I said, you can go to any of them except for Duke.
UNC was okay.
And I was dead serious.
Wow.
I wasn't joking. It sounds funny now, but I would not even let them look at Duke.
That's the same thing with, if my kids root for the Yankees or the Lakers, that's it. There's no, you can root for another team. Like I want them to be Celtics fans and you know, but if they ever win off the Yankees or the Lakers,
no way.
I'd have a lot of trouble.
Wait, is the rivalry sports based?
It is, but Duke,
there's like some stereotypes
well, it's not.
Let's.
It's not really such a stereotype. I mean,
it's truth. Yeah.
I mean, there's a huge north-south divide.
Okay.
If you haven't picked that up, I mean, the kids I went to school with would regularly say, "The South shall rise again." So there was this huge divide. And when I came up to New England to go to graduate school, to go to Gordon Conwell, they thought I had betrayed the South. But so Duke was the northern school.
Yeah.
And Wake Forest, Carolina, all those schools are southern schools, you know. So that's why it was more of a north-south divide than anything.
Because now I think the way people view it in like the rivalries, like the Duke is where the preppy, more wealthy people go to school, and like the real, you know, blue collar people, you know, it's kind of, I feel like that's the way it's played out now.
Yeah.
Who JJ Redick, who's now the coach of the Lakers, who I don't like, was also.
Yeah.
So we can share in our.
No, I don't like him either.
We can share in that hatred. Well, so then college, and then you said you went to seminary.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we should. Yeah, how did
that
okay,
happen?
so 5 years with InterVarsity.
Oh, that's right.
So
you were
I
at InterVarsity.
I
well, how did you get there? Wait, we need to go back to the
Okay.
you're searching the world religions.
Oh yeah,
Let-
kind of left that hanging.
we left that
didn't we?
hanging. Then what?
You found another one.
Yeah, I did. Lo and behold.
Actually.
So at that point, as I was looking at the religious leaders, Jesus did seem unique to me, and he's the one that at that point I knew the most about. But as I compared them, he stood out. And then I I was intrigued and frustrated and a lot of mixed emotions about Jesus. And then I got to the resurrection, and I just could not believe that. I had such a hard time. And I still have this legal paper of reasons why it didn't happen and why it was, made up. And hallucinations. I mean, all the classic, this didn't happen. And so I felt like I needed to research it. So I read some books. I remember I went to the library and Xeroxed all the places in the Bible that talked about the resurrection. And I took scissors and cut it and taped it all together and I really made a study of this. And I think I had 2 pages of objections, and then I ended up with 8 pages of reasons why it probably happened. And I realized in the scale in my mind, not my heart, that it tipped. So it was going to be harder to not believe in the resurrection than to believe it, even though my scale didn't flip. And that was very pivotal for embracing Christianity. At that point.
It's a lot of work you put in. Now you could just chat GPT it and you can. You didn't have to do any of that, Richard.
I'm picturing like a Scandal episode. You have like an NCIS.
Yes,
you got the here.
That's right. And then have yarn.
Exactly.
Well, it felt in some ways similar to that, but boy, was that formative. As I look back on my life, I mean, that was the basis of me wanting to do Alpha.
Sure.
Because I had one person, the InterVarsity staff, this is why I went on staff with InterVarsity. I had one staff worker, oh gosh, you would just love this guy. His name is Al Andrews. He let me ask my questions. And he just walked with me in all of my doubts, all of my questions. And he became a dear friend and has been a dear friend. So I wanted to have the influence he had on me with others. That's why I went on staff.
That's actually so interesting because it shines another light into who Richard is, because Richard, you're one of the people on staff that I think welcomes questions the most.
Yes.
And is not afraid to, typically when you're when you're going through phases of doubt or questioning, I think the tendency is to feel like we need to run away from those things because it's scary. But the fact that you, even at that age, you embraced it and you're like, I want to confront those things, I think is probably why now you're one of the people when they have questions and doubts, it's like you're one of the safest people to go to with those questions and you welcome them and receive it without any judgment or any. And so, wow, I can't believe that's kind of a bit of your origin story there too.
I know.
Is your own personal journey with that.
Yeah, I think for me personally, and in particular, this one guy, I just thought if he hadn't allowed me to ask questions, if he said stuff them, if he said, you know what, the answers are really clear.
Yes.
And he just didn't do it. And
making you feel like, of course, like why?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And he gave me books on doubt, Os Guinness book on doubt. I mean, I'm like, oh gosh. And he introduced me to Thomas, the disciple Thomas who had questions and Jesus didn't, ridicule or strike him dead. And so I just thought, man, I want to do that for other people.
Wow.
It was so important to me. And so that was very formative. This one guy in particular.
So he was an InterVarsity staff
worker.
He
was our Wake Forest InterVarsity.
Yeah.
And he is unbelievable. He's so funny and gifted and real. So we became really close friends and would vacation. We went to Israel together. We went to Switzerland together. he just became a really dear friend.
Wow.
And now he works with the music stars in Nashville, Amy Grant and all those. He has a counseling service that gives free counseling to the stars because they can be so lonely. And anyway, I don't know if you need to cut that, but anyway, he's really just a great guy.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask a bit more about InterVarsity because I know how important that was for your own personal journey. And interestingly, so many people on our staff
I know
have this connection.
Huge InterVarsity history. And I think even Jeanette has known you and Pastor Doug. And so many connections through InterVarsity. And so can you tell us a little bit more about how InterVarsity might have impacted your own personal faith journey and what that?
Well, the foundation of InterVarsity is priority of scripture study, of student leadership, and
it's like the inductive Bible study.
Inductive Bible study and the church. And so all those are just such key foundational elements that when I came on staff here, I felt like I was just an InterVarsity staff worker at, a church.
Yeah.
Because everything we did was discipleship and evangelism. And that was my first title.
To think about that. Like Richard is more of like InterVarsity at church versus like a typical church.
It's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Yeah.
So so you graduate college?
Went to InterVarsity.
Okay. Did you graduate?
Don't tell anybody. And then I went on to write some big books. The Farm was actually another good book I enjoyed. The Farm.
I don't know if we know that one.
People have given me. I would just come into my office.
Yeah, Richard Rhodes' books.
Richard Rhodes.
That's so good.
It's like, would you sign this for me?
That's amazing.
Anyway, so I did 5 years with InterVarsity, and then I just came to this place that I felt like I was just telling students about my own experience. Let me tell you about how that worked for me. And I just wasn't giving them scripture as much as I wanted. So that's when I came up to Gordon Conwell. And there were a number of InterVarsity staff that came to Gordon Conwell. It was like a pipeline from.
I was gonna ask how
there was
how Gordon Conwell came up for you.
There were different students and staff. Do you remember Daniel Harrell from Park Street? He was associate pastor at Park Street for many years.
Okay.
He was a student of mine. Todd Ingleson was a student of mine.
Okay.
A student at Carolina.
Yeah.
So they came to Gordon Conwell, and it was like a pipeline to.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait, where were you in Ivy staff worker?
Chapel Hill.
You were at Chapel
UNC
Hill. That's right.
Chapel Hill and Duke. Can you believe?
So you would withhold some information to those at Duke, or?
Yes, I had some bad experiences with Duke students. I must be scarred.
You didn't let them know about the resurrection. You got to.
No,
I
said you can look at Jesus if you want, but no. My first talk I ever gave was in front of Duke students, and it was the topic was nurture. And I wrote on the whiteboard, N-U-T-U-R-E. And I went on and I started talking, and one of the Duke students, about 5 minutes in, said, Richard, this is really inspiring, your talk on nurture. But can you explain what nurture is?
And you said, you're
a Duke student.
Oh, these Duke students. They think they know better.
You can tell I'm scarred.
Yeah. So did you make up a new word? You were like, neuter. Let me tell you about
neuter.
Let me tell you about.
No, I just turned red and dug a hole and crawled in it. It was terrible. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so so Todd was a student at UNC?
Was, at UNC.
Okay. So then so there was a pipe. Okay, so then you go to Gordon Conwell.
Yes.
Which is where I went, and you kind of went.
What do you mean I kind of went? I went.
Oh, okay.
I went.
I thought you went for like half.
No, I went.
Okay, all right.
I went for the full thing.
You did the full thing. Okay.
All right.
I thought you went halvesies.
John.
Halvesies. No,
She did the full.
I did the full thing.
And she has a degree.
I have a
probably
degree.
Signed by Billy Graham.
Sure do.
Okay.
and Richard Rhodes,
Richard Rhodes.
other Richard Rhodes,
the author,
Richard Rhodes. Little did you know that would land you New England for decades.
What year was decades. that you came to seminary then?
Let's see, 85.
85. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I would never have.
The plan was to go back. Was the plan to go back?
The plan was not to be here.
Yes.
I don't know. I didn't know where I'd be at that point.
Did you know Dory yet or no?
I met Dory. Yes, I did.
You already did.
And that's how I got to Gordon Conwell, because we were writing letters. We met through InterVarsity. She was on staff at UC San Diego. We met at Urbana.
Oh, you're
84.
Oh,
yeah. We met at the staff conference, and then I just thought she was the cutest thing ever. So I wrote her a letter. We had 3 conversations at Urbana. I wrote her a letter and asked if she'd write me back. And she said, well, I'm not a letter writer, but I'll write you maybe once a month or something. Because I asked if we could be like pen pals. Mm-hmm. We wrote letters for a whole year.
Oh,
wow.
And why am I telling you that?
Yeah, just how you guys got to, how you went to.
I know. Yes. So I wrote her in one of these early letters. I said, I'm considering a seminary in Chicago and one in Boston. And do you have any thoughts? And she said, well, I've always thought it'd be fun to live in Boston. I said, God just led me to Gordon Conwell.
The Lord.
I was praying one day.
just
gave me a vision. It was on a piece of paper.
So you might have not gone to Gordon Conwell if it wasn't for Dory. You might have not been at Great Chapel if it wasn't for Dory.
Oh, totally.
Wow.
So she went to Gordon Conwell. Right. That's where she did her counseling.
She did her marriage and family degree.
So you were there at the same time.
She went after me. She put me through and then went after that.
Okay. But when did she move out here?
We got married in my 3rd year of seminary.
Okay.
I stretched out my 3rd year into 2.
Okay.
And we got married in my 3rd year, and then I finished up the next year.
So you guys were just writing letters the entire time to each other?
Well, we wrote letters for a year, and then I invited myself out to to go see her, and she said yes. Oh, but can I tell another story?
Please.
I said, I'm having a hard time remembering exactly what you look like. Would you send me a picture? And she sent me a picture of her on a ski slope with goggles. And she was about this tall, about an inch tall at the top of the hill. And I said, that is one feisty gal.
That is one feisty gal.
And
I love
she wrote me in one letter, she said, I just need you to know I'm not a Southern belle. I'm a feisty California woman. And
wow.
I'm like, yes.
I love that.
I know. Yeah, and she is. She's phenomenal. And so we wrote letters. Then I visited her for a week. We had a phenomenal week. And then she came and met my family. She took a summer school course at Gordon Conwell. We drove south, saw my family. I met her family. And then, can I keep going with this? So
yes,
then I proposed on Wingersheek Beach.
I
lived with 6 guys in this house.
Mm-hmm.
We paid $100 each a month at this house, and we just had it in the winter. It was
on Wingersheek?
On Wingersheek, a winter rental, and then we had to move out.
That's exactly. I same thing. My senior year.
Where did you live?
Skipper Way on Wingersheek.
We lived. I'll remember it in just a minute.
Yeah.
So yeah, there were a handful of places.
Thing.
Yeah, and man, was it cold in the winter. Anyway, so I built a fire, kicked my roommates out, proposed, and she didn't say yes. She didn't actually say anything. And I said, "What does this mean? Maybe?"
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "Well, I can't say." And I'm like, "Oh gosh." So the next morning, took her to the airport, flew back. I kept waiting for any hint that she might say yes on the phone call. I'd fly right out there to California. She's from San Diego, so it's gorgeous. And a couple of weeks goes by. She always would send me a box of brownies for exams. I had exams. I went to the mailbox, and my roommate had put a card that she had written a poem And the poem led me to a clue, to a clue, to a clue, to a clue. And then the last clue was her.
It was her?
She was there.
She was there.
In person.
On Wingersheek Beach.
No.
Wait, what was the time?
Oh my.
This was okay, so when was this?
So
how soon after the fire?
After I proposed, this is like a month.
Okay.
A month. She flew.
Is that great?
That's a good story.
Wow.
So, I mean, I went one clue to one clue to one clue, and the last clue led me out on the beach, and I'm like, what's this? And I step out of the house, and there she is.
And she says what?
No.
And then she leads you.
Yeah, she says,
no.
Of course not. I just wanted to have some fun.
No, I remember she was in all white, and I just grabbed her and proposed again, and she said yes.
Wow.
That's beautiful.
And
where is she?
She said that the reason she couldn't say yes was she had to go back and drive around La Jolla in her VW bug and see if she could give it up. So she was counting the cost. But isn't that
counting the cost of
leaving.
Of leaving. Oh, I thought
of marrying me.
I thought she had to sell the bug or something for.
She had to sell the bug. How many?
I don't know.
Well,
I really love this bug.
The bug didn't come out, so that was part of it. I'm not sure it was the biggest part. I think it was putting up with me, marrying me, but coming out and she never wanted to be a pastor's wife. I mean, so everything that I was asking her was a sacrificial decision on her part. But is that so?
Wait, this is a minor point, but after the fire, all the roommates all leave. They come back. Richard, what happened? What? Take me to that moment. What did you say?
It didn't go very well, guys.
You know how those things go.
It's not a no.
It's not a no.
Did she say? What'd she say?
What did she say? She didn't say anything. I said, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if anything's going to happen. And I didn't know what the process was that she was going through, but now it makes perfect sense that she had to go count the cost because we've been married 37 years. I mean, she's been out in this cold.
So that's exactly Grace Chapel. That's aligns right with your time at Grace Chapel. Then.
So we've been married 1 year.
So I think 36 years here.
Yeah.
So 37
I'm
years
36
married.
years here and 37 married.
Wow.
Isn't that? But that's so her. If you know Dory,
it's so good.
It's so Dory.
It's so good.
That she's just feisty enough to pull this off.
It's a great story.
Yeah. Wait. How did you then stumble into Grace Chapel? Because I don't know. How do people find jobs back then? Was there?
The classifieds?
Yeah, I was highly recruited. There was a headhunter several that were fighting over me. Just because of my books.
They heard.
Yeah.
News spread to Howard Clark.
Yeah, see.
It was based on the atomic bomb book that they brought you in. Yeah.
They thought if this guy can write about atomic bombs, he's bound to be able to do church. I mean, seriously.
That would have been a great story if he thought they hired the other Richard Rhodes.
I know. Wait a minute. Tell us about your books. Let's see. I haven't written the. Well, I mean, Dory had a big part in that because I got this letter, handwritten letter. I still have it. From Doug Whalen.
Oh, Pastor Doug.
Who was on staff. Was he? He wasn't on staff here. He was an elder here and on the search team for this position.
I see.
Evangelism and discipleship was the position. And he sent me a job description of this role. And I knew Doug a little bit. I knew of him. I didn't really know him. And he said, would you be interested in this job? And I remember where I was when I read it, and I thought, there's no way I want to go to that church.
Mm.
I just thought, because at that point, I was thinking God was calling me to plant churches in New England because we didn't need one big church. We needed a bunch of churches. We needed churches to reach each community because everything's so community oriented. And Grace Chapel, in my mind, was a church that took everybody from all the small churches and put them all in one big church. And people were driving a long ways and couldn't bring their neighbors. And so I was not excited about Grace Chapel, but I read the job description and I did. I thought this is like an InterVarsity staff worker. This is a great role. I would love this role.
Compensation and that's
yeah. So I don't have to raise support.
Exactly. The university life.
Yeah. And so Dory said, I said, I'm not gonna pursue this. And she said, I think you should. And I mean, like, we need to eat. You need to get some experience, experience interviewing. And I came down and the senior pastor, his name was Howard Clark. Oh gosh. He was a Lakers fan. He had, I know. You probably wouldn't like him. Anyway, he had a full length poster of Magic Johnson on his door.
No, he didn't.
Yeah.
In Boston. Oh goodness.
Wow.
So I walked into his office and then I thought, this is a sports guy. And then he took me in his 280Z, which was a sports car before your time. Anyway, he took me to lunch and the last thing he said was, God's put it on my heart to plant churches. And all of a sudden, this light bulb went off in my head. And as I'm driving back, I'm thinking maybe God might want me to go there and take all these people and spread them out. I mean, that was how that all started.
Wow.
But we were in seminary. Dory encouraged me to apply.
Wow. So then so that was it.
Yeah. What was that job initially?
It was It's called discipleship and evangelism.
Okay.
And Jack Richardson was on that.
No, different Jack.
Different Jack.
Yeah.
Jack Richard. Yes.
Jack and Marion.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I did their wedding 34 years ago.
Wow.
So I came and you know how sometimes when you come to a door and you can like ram it open or you can touch it and it flings open. This one just flung open. It was just like, if I don't go, I'm going to be disobedient because it just, everything fell into place. And I really liked Howard a lot. And I liked the role. And
so this was 1988. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So I came on staff September 88.
Wow.
A month before
Dave was born.
Yeah, Dave helped me to feel really young one day when he came up and said, you came on staff before I was born.
I'm sure there's lots to say about what was Grace Chapel like in those days?
It was very white. It was very buttoned up. 3-piece suit buttoned up. And there were 2 African-American families. And the staff was small. There were about 15.
Were we on were we on that lot 59?
Yes.
Yes. It was just a different building, but on that.
Yes. It was, it's been transformed now, but it was the same sanctuary, but now it's been remodeled. So yeah, it was very different and it was very polished. There was no really not much vulnerability from the front. So it was quite a bit different. It was, a great church in a lot of ways, but it was very different.
You said something earlier about just the impact that Howard had on you as a pastor. Say more about that.
Yeah. So, as a young pastor, you're asked to. I was asked to do a wedding, and I went down to his office and said, "I just got asked to do a wedding. What do I do?" And he said, "Well, why don't we do it together?" And looking back, it's like I can barely do my own, the weddings that I'm asked to do. I'm not going to go do one that somebody's, but he did the whole wedding. He did the rehearsal. He did everything with me. And then he did the wedding ceremony with me. I did parts. He did parts and he just taught me how to do it. So he just was a great mentor in that way. and we skied together. We became friends. He's a great guy.
You've actually done, which has been really helpful for me too, because when I've done like my first funeral or something, and I'll be like, Richard, it's my first one, and you just sent me all your documents that you have.
Yes.
Which I feel like sometimes pastors can be protective, over their stuff, because if it's really good, they don't want other people to steal all your content. But you were always so open with just, here, take this, and if it's helpful to you, great. But if not, which well,
it's probably from his example of he was very open-handed with everything.
And now you've had, can you recall how many senior pastors you've been with now?
So let's see. Howard was the one who hired me, and then Gordon McDonnell, and then Brian, and now Joshua. So
I feel like now that you're retiring, you can kind of share this. Who was your favorite, Richard? Well, you can say whatever you want now, right? Now that you're about to retire.
I really secretly wanted Leah to be our senior pastor. I learned something from each one. They were very different, and I had to adjust to them, not them to me. I had to figure out what they could provide for me, because when I first would start, I would be frustrated because I was expecting this, and they could give me this, but once I learned that, then it became. So it wasn't always easy in that way.
How did you, I don't know, how did you navigate that? Like, did you have some mentors or confidants that you would sort of help you coach process? How did you learn that?
Well, I always found it helpful to have friends outside of the church that I trusted, that I could talk very openly about with. I learned early on that if I listened to fellow staff members complain about someone, I began to have the same complaints they had. And I began to learn that was triangulation, and I needed to stop those people if they hadn't gone to the person they were criticizing. And I would say, I need you to stop. Because I'll give you an example with no names other than Howard. There was a faction within the staff that did not appreciate his leadership. In fact, formed a little team inside the team that rebelled. And several of these people would come and try to convince me why he should not be the senior pastor. And I at first, I just naively listened, as I'm listening and being empathetic. And finally, it dawned on me, I was starting to feel the same things that this person was feeling, or these people. And I stopped him and just said, I cannot. First of all, have you gone to him and told him to his face that you are frustrated with this? Oh, no, he would never listen. Well, I'm not going to listen either. And so that was a big learning curve for me. And being able to, and then I realized that complaints against supervisors are often unrealistic expectations. That Howard wasn't going to ever give these staff what they wanted, but he had other things to contribute. So I just have worked pretty hard to try to find what those things are. Because I remember saying to Dory, unless there's a moral failure in the senior pastor, I'm not going to leave. Wow. And that was a pretty definitive thing for me to think at that point, because that's kept me in the boat a lot.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think has been, I think you're touching on something important, and is connected to kind of the question of like, how have you lasted so long? And, it's the life of an institution, it's just, it can be whether church, inside the church, outside the church.
Yes.
It can be hard to navigate, and because it sort of can take on, I don't know, like a life of its own in some ways.
Yes.
And especially as leadership changes, and it's just, everyone has, I think you're right to identify missed expectations. Everyone has their own set of expectations. But yeah, and I think it's even more complicated in a church environment where it's, its mission is to serve and love and meet needs. And so that sort of, it can enhance the feelings of missed expectations.
Yes.
So yeah, I just what do you think what has been your rudder through this? Because it feels like you sort of see you as someone who hasn't just numbed out along the way, you know what I mean? And but you also, you've sort of, you haven't lashed out, you haven't numbed out, you've sort of
found your lane. Yeah.
Found a lane.
Well, I think, and it's not an easy balance, but I think it's been very important for me to be honest about my frustrations and to take them directly to the person that I'm frustrated with. Because what I've realized is that people that work with me that I have supervised over the years, the thing that gets me the most frustrated is if they have a frustration with me that they don't tell me about. Because there might be something that I could change, I could do different. There might be a misunderstanding. There might just be a different value, a different perspective, but at least I would know about it. So I kind of started going early to people that I was frustrated with. And I remember one of these senior pastors, I guess I can say, because, Gordon and I have a very close relationship, but I, at one point early on, was having a struggle with something. And I just said, can we just go have breakfast? And over tears, both of us, I confessed that I was really struggling with some aspects of his leadership. And I felt like I did what I needed to do. And so I it's not putting your head in the sand, but it's also not running away. So one of my favorite little sayings in my head is, because I would watch staff over the years complain, and it was usually, oh, I wish I were doing this, out in another church or whatever. And I would say to myself, and sometimes to them, if the grass is not green on your side of the fence, if the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, water the grass on your side. Mm-hmm. And so I just over time began to realize some of it was misplaced expectations that I needed to shift. Some of it was something I needed to confront, and the leader changed. But I couldn't live with myself if I didn't confront it, if I didn't be honest about it. But if it wasn't a moral failure, sometimes it just came down to style. This is different, totally different style. That's not how I would do it. And so I just would stay through it.
So how much did your wise, trained therapist wife help you navigate some of these emotionally?
She talked me off the ledge a few times.
I feel like that's who we really need to interview.
I know, exactly.
Because I feel like Dory's got the real stories that you've only told her.
And she's a lot more interesting. But I always worried that Dory would come home and therapy me. She just never has, which is very interesting how she dichotomizes, how compartmentalizes that, is able to leave that quote at work. But she was a very wise, have you thought about this perspective, and would empathize with it. But to be honest, I don't take a lot home. Because I didn't want the kids to hate the church. If I was frustrated with somebody, the last thing I wanted was them to go, and I had seen that in other pastors' kids, that they hated the church because the pastor was so frustrated with something happening in the church. And when I get home, I just want to be with my family. I don't really want to.
A side note, speaking of Dory, I just saw randomly on YouTube, I was going through some stuff, and she was interviewing Don Vin.
Oh, yes.
The Faces of Bedford. It was on the Bedford Town YouTube page.
Yeah. So she was the vice president of an organization in Bedford called Bedford Embraces Diversity. And it was just her way of contributing to the diversification of Bedford. And she had this idea, if we can just interview people from Bedford, that have a diverse background and talk about what it's been like. What has it been like to be a Black family in Bedford or whatever? And so she did some of those interviews. She did it with Don Venn, which was fun.
That's so perfect because I think it speaks a little bit to how you guys are so plugged into where you. I know we've been going long. I'm sorry.
No. I just want to stop the spam.
So it speaks a bit into how engaged you are into your local community, which is part of your job description right now is community engagement. But something that some people might not know is you go to Dunkin' Donuts every single morning. Almost every day, right? We are not sponsored by Dunkin' Donuts, but you go there every day. How much money do you think you spent at Dunkin' Donuts? Are you a rewards member?
Dory added it up one time.
Oh, really?
Oh, it was like $3,000 or something a year.
Oh, yeah. A year.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's a lot.
Yeah.
We don't talk about that now.
Yeah.
But how long have you been doing that for? Going to the same Dunkin'?
Gosh. Well, I'm at a different Dunkin'.
You're at a different one now.
Different one now, but I have gone to the same one that's in Bedford for, I mean 30 all my years here.
Okay, so much so that you were telling me a story that I want you to share just a little bit of how that since you do that, you get to know people. I mean, if you go into the town of Lexington, Richard, you're like a local celebrity to so many people who know you because you're so engaged and talk to people. You're always chatting with people. Everyone knows who you are. And so much so that someone at Dunkin' Donuts who is not a part of our church asked you to do a funeral for someone in their family.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell me?
So there's a woman at the Dunkins that said to me, she looked distraught. And I said, well, I'll call her Mary. Mary, what? Everything okay? And she said, oh, my husband's father just passed. And she looked at me and she said, I don't know any you're the only religious person I know. What do we do? Like, what are we supposed to do next? And would you? And I said, well, a lot of people have a celebration of the person's life. And she said, well, would you do that? And I said, absolutely. So that began, getting to know the husband and, why he loved his dad so much and lots of tears and family meetings and stuff. And so I did the service, but, and she, during that service, I've never done a funeral where I got interrupted as I'm giving the sermon, as the little message. And I remember I started by saying, Jesus once, found himself at a funeral. And I told some little thing, and someone shouts out from the crowd, I know exactly what you're talking about. That happened to me. And and I'm like, this is so beautiful. I just thought that was so great. And I said, well, just tell us about that. And so in the sermon, somebody is telling a story. Jeez. It was that's pretty cool. So beautiful.
What's so funny? When you told me that story the other day, I was thinking about how I used to, when I was an intern at my old church, at Korean church, every Sunday morning, I was in charge of picking up Panera bagels for our staff meeting in the morning. So every Sunday for years, for like 4 or 5 years, every Sunday at the same exact time, I'd place it with the same exact order, and the same person would do my order, and she would act as if I've never met her.
Oh, gosh.
I'm like, I come out, she's like, what are you here for? I'm like, I'm here to pick up my order every single week. And I used to get so mad at her because I was like, I'm the same. Can you at least recognize? Like, yes. Would you? But you're so different in that you reach out to the other before they come to you, before they talk to you. You're always asking how they're doing, and I was up until even yesterday, or when you told me that story, I was like, she just customer service, and but the way that you live your life is before someone even comes to you, you're always going out and asking them how they're doing, and now I feel guilty. So I'm sorry, Panera worker at the Woburn Panera that many years ago, the grudge I've held.
But now you're going to really get to know this person and probably do their funeral or something.
Exactly. So yeah, that's just the kind of person you are, Richard.
Well, I mean, part of it is I'm, reasonably outgoing, but the other part is that I just think names are so important. So I I always try to ask the server, tell me your name, and try to use their name. And I usually try to tell them my name. So, I'm Richard. So this morning, I drove up to Duncan's. I go to the one now on Bedford Street, and this voice comes on. I recognize the voice, and I said, hi, Annette, how you doing this morning? And she goes, I'm doing fine, Richard. And have you got the Beamer today? And I'm like, and it's just, for me, it feels like what God wants us to do is to know people. And that names are just, it's amazing how important that the names are.
Well, I think touches on a really significant legacy that you have here that's unexpected at a place like Grace Chapel that is larger and can be, that feeling of getting lost or anonymous and having, both from congregant side and people who may come, who may feel like overwhelmed. And so for some people, the anonymity can be a draw.
Right.
But even from a staff side, they're just feeling the overwhelm of like, gosh, where do I even start? And you have like just set such an incredible legacy of taking the time to know people and learn their names, and in a really, really profound way. And I think has been probably, I feel like I've encountered lots of people over the years who like, you were the first person that they met, and your warmth and your smile and, oh my God, like shock at he remembered my name. So I think that, is a really, even as I go through, move through the lobby of our campus here in Lexington and seeing, I'm just like continually inspired by the interactions that you have with people and the things that you know about them and the names that you remember. It's a really remarkable
that's
thing
very,
that you
very
have.
kind of you to say that.
And the thing that you do too is like inviting people to sit with you, which like for me, I don't want to sit with anyone, because I don't want people to look at how I'm receiving the worship. But you bring them to sit next to you, get to know them. Like, we're gonna miss that part of your presence for sure.
Well, some people have said, wow, you're so good with names. And I'm like, actually, I'm not. The only reason I remember is because I have a little card in my back pocket and I write their name down. Red hair, kid with a such and such, and that's the only way that I can remember their name. But I just love when someone's face lights up and you remember their name. It's like,
except if they went to Duke, you'd be all right. No, just cross them off.
Any Duke, and
if you're from Duke,
the Toscano boy. I don't even talk to that guy anymore. No.
Wait, give us a hack here, real quick. Like, so you have index cards.
Yeah, I just have a card
right after you meet someone. Yeah. And you write down their name and a little description.
Yes. And then I have a stack of these, and then I review it. I try to review it before I come the next Sunday, just so I can remember their name.
CCB frowns upon this activity.
No.
Blackbot and CCB frown upon whatever Richard is doing.
It's old school. It's just, when people remember my name, it just means so much. And so I just think that's important.
I feel like we probably should begin to, God bless whoever's made it this far into, I don't even know how long we've been recording. Oh my gosh, but,
I know.
I think just maybe a couple more things. If you have, like, is there just a fun memory, like one of your favorite memories in your time as a pastor here at Grace Chapel? I know you have so many things that you've done and accomplished, winter blasts and, this right now, community engagements and working with refugees, and there's Haitian community. Like there's so many things that you've done, but is there anything that kind of sticks out, whether it's fun or really meaningful to you? Is there something that just, I know you're going to share a lot of these stories over the next few days and weeks, but is there one that sticks out to you?
One funny one that just came to my mind was Howard, this senior pastor. One morning he was up front and he was getting ready to hand the mic to me and to do a ministry moment. And he said, and so now I'm going to call. And he looked right down at me and he says, I'm going to call a And he just couldn't remember my name. He just froze. And I yelled, "It's Richard." And he got so red because he was introverted. And he said, "Yeah, okay, Richard," And the next morning, we all put name tags on and met him at his door and said, "Hi," reintroduced ourselves.
That's so funny.
Probably one of the most meaningful ones that I haven't talked about is one where I did with my Jewish rabbi friend from Temple Isaiah. He retired 2 years ago. He came to me one day. We got to know each other through the Lexington Interfaith Clergy Association. Great guy, just such a great guy. And he came to me and said, he had someone from his congregation come up to him and say, "I had a person on the soccer field that told me I was going to hell. And they told me they went to Grace Chapel." And he said, "Richard, that doesn't sound to me like the Grace Chapel I know through you. And maybe we'd be wise to get folks together from our congregation." So he got 25 people. I got 25 people, Grace Chapel people. And we all met for 7 nights of dialogue.
Wow.
It was powerful. That first night when people came in, the Jewish folks were standoffish because they thought the Christians would try to convert them from Grace Chapel. And the Christians were standoffish because they thought the Jewish folks hated Jesus. And we mixed them up. They all took a number and they sat at different, tables that were mixed. And and then at the end of each session, so we had a curriculum we worked through, and at the end of each session, Howard and I would sit up on stools and we did Stump the Clergy time. Oh, wow. And they could ask us anything they wanted. Way. And all these folks saw our friendship and the conversations that we had. And at the end of 7 weeks, they demanded that we go longer. Wow. So we went 3 more nights we took really difficult passages that we differ on a lot. And then they came to a worship service here. And then we went and celebrated Passover. They invited us to celebrate Passover with them. And he got up at the beginning before the Passover celebration, and he said, "Richard, I would love for you to tell all of us why Passover means so much to you as a Christian." I thought, you're giving me that opportunity?
You can't.
I mean, is that beautiful? What a heart this guy has. And I said, well, I stood up and I looked at all my Jewish friends and I said, sometimes I wonder if you think we've stolen your celebration with our Passover.
Yeah.
And they all went, yes. And I just then went on to say why it means so much to us, that Jesus, we feel, is that Passover lamb. So then we celebrate Passover. That was.
And then they now all go to Grace Chapel?
Yeah, they do. They do. They actually, all of them, and the rabbi too.
The rabbi. Well, that's one of the things like that, the interfaith thing that you work with people, leaders from different faith backgrounds, and you've done that for years. Yeah. Now, which do you think is the second best religion?
Let's see. I would probably put the Baha'i faith. It has been rich to be with other faiths.
You do a kind of ministry that no one else can even replicate.
I know.
Like that story is a story that very few people in an evangelical church can even come close to replicating that kind of, because it's based on relationship and it's based on trust, and that takes time and energy and effort. And a lot of times we do the quick thing, and the kind of, that is just like something that I don't think we can ever replicate. And
I think once you get in that space, you'd be surprised. I mean, Dom.
I know. I was going to just say Dom.
I've invited Dom into this space. He loves it.
He does.
He is the new Richard Rhodes in the sense of they love him. All of those clergy just think the world of him. And he went on this last retreat with us. There were 15 of us that went, and all shared our faith stories. And he's great in that space.
I was going to say, Leah, it's like you're saying the legacy that you leave. Like that's the kind of legacy that even for someone like Dom has watched you do that, and you've allowed him to enter into that space. And Leah and I feel like are so completely, blessed by what the legacy you've left to us as staff people.
Yeah.
Wow, that's very kind.
Well, so I know we're trying to wrap up. I feel like I have one last selfish question on this.
Yes.
But along these lines, I think it's been striking to me in the past, and it's particularly so during this conversation, just sort of acknowledging the depth of relationship that you have with so many different people inside and outside of the church community in a really authentic and true way. That is not motivated by an agenda, but really sees people for who they are and connects just with your true self. So I think that's one aspect of who you are. The second is just sort of what a highly effective kind of leader you are. I feel like, we didn't, I remember when you were my supervisor for a season, I think there were many things that were formative for me during that, but one of which was sort of the prioritization that I feel like I saw you embody in terms of, you'd have your 3 things that you'd be focusing on that are stuck to your computer. And as someone who can sometimes get sort of lost in the many needs, that was really helpful to me to sort of orient. And I think the way you lead meetings, the way you're very effective at sort of cutting through the mess.
I loved how efficient you were. With
so efficient. John is a high efficiency kind of guy. We would talk. He was like, "Oh, Richard,
begin and end on time. There you go.
We're beginning and ending on time." So, which is those are two to hold both of those things. And then I want to throw in too, just sort of as someone who is, has 3 young kids at home and trying to figure that whole thing out. Just how much, you touched on it briefly, but how much family really it was a priority for you. How, what words of how do you do all of those things?
And especially if you don't even like people, like me. No, that's a very good question, and one that I would say I didn't always do well. There were seasons where that would get out of balance and I'd have to right the ship. But the overwhelming priority for me was that my relationship with God and my family would come way above church. And so, I'd say family first. I would tell you guys when I was supervising you, just make family first. When you would say, should I go to this funeral or should I do this ministry thing? Family first. Because your kids, they're not going to remember all the great ministry things. They're going to remember whether you thought they were more important than the church, than your job. And so that was very, very important to me. And keeping that in balance. And the second thing I would say is just I had to have rest, because I might come across as an extrovert to people, but I'm only on the Myers-Briggs 52% extrovert. So I need a lot of downtime, a lot of time on my own, and I just had to have that every week, or I didn't want to see people on Sunday, and so I think those 2 things really helped me over time. And I took every vacation day, every sabbatical, every chance. I didn't miss those because those were times that I needed to be restored in order to make it.
Well, we have so many other memories and things that we could talk about. This would be another couple hours. But as we are kind of closing, Richard, is there anything that's been on your heart that you would like to share to people who are watching this, or about your time at Grace Chapel? Anything that you felt?
Let's see. I think I would say that my faith has gotten simpler and simpler as I've gone. It started with a lot of theological, wrestlings and beliefs and all of that have kind of, not that those aren't important. It's just not nearly as important as love. And so as I kind of, look back, the most important things I've done have been when I've been dependent on God to do it. God's the only explanation. And I've been on my knees a lot because a lot of the things I took on were bigger than me. And then the second is love. That just, I think Brian used to say this all the time, love the person in front of you. And, I have this picture of heaven, standing in front of Jesus, and he's not going to ask me, Richard, did you believe the right things? Did you get this right on the end times or the church, ecclesiology? He's not going to ask me that. He's just going to simply say, did you love the person in front of you? And I love the simplicity of that. It just helps me, get everything out of my mind that we tend to think is, and especially in the church world, we think is so important. We've got to figure this out. We've got to figure this out. And no, we don't. We just need to love. Are we loving the person in front of us? Because we could spend all of our time figuring things out and completely forgetting the person in front of us. And I think that probably is the overriding thought I would have to conclude with.
Well, Richard, I think for me personally, of course, you were part of our Lexington team for a bit during a really difficult time. I think in particular, one of the things that I really appreciated was during COVID, when there were a lot of, racial dynamics that our country was processing and handling, how you were such a champion during that time. Especially, I know the Black Lives Matter movement was something that you really engaged with and for our church and running small groups. And also there was a time when Asians and Asian Americans in our country were going through some really difficult, tough seasons. And I remember you sending me text messages during that time that was just really meaningful and thoughtful and made me feel seen in those moments. And I get emotional thinking about those things. But I think that's the kind of pastor that you've been. And so just really appreciate you, Richard. And I think for me, working with you I've been wanting to become a better pastor as a result of being with you and working with you. So
that's very meaningful to hear you say that. Yeah, I've the two of you have been very special in my life. Back to that Lexington team. And Leah, I'll get emotional talking about how you loved our kids through some tough times, and how you loved me through that, and was there as a parent, trying to understand how to best love and care for our kids. So I'm grateful. I'm really grateful for you and for you, John, the time that we've served together.
Yeah, Richard, I think as someone who has also wrestled with, being a part of a large mega church, a church that I too never would have imagined being at this long and working at. I just, you have been a touchstone for me over these years of someone who has seen me and created space for my voice and has come to me just as a friend. And you have been someone that I have so admired and looked up to, and simultaneous, in the times that you have sought my insight and wisdom as a leader in this church, especially when I was, younger, finding my way as a young woman. And that was incredibly formative for me. Just you care what I think and have to say. And that I don't know if I think you're a big reason why I am still able to be a part of the church, honestly, and just your humility and the way you have genuinely partnered, and just I don't think I've experienced that in this way. And I think you have been just very healing for me as and just an older man that I look up to and a father kind of figure. Father Richard.
That's right. That was, well, thank you for saying that.
I mean, you were years ago, you were someone here, there were things I was going through early on when I was getting married to Andrew and some things going on even in my family. And I looked back recently on an email that I had sent out to folks that I trusted at the time to invite to pray into and really sensitive thing that I was going through. And you and Dory were on that list.
I remember that. I remember that. I remember your wedding. So beautiful. Well, this is part of the closure that I've actually needed. So thank you for that opportunity and, bringing up Father Richard again.
Father Richard. Don't you have a, we have something. Don't you have something?
Oh, we want to give you some gifts before you left, Richard. So when you were part of
Duncan's gift card?
Yeah. Not that kind of gift. Don't worry. We don't have that kind of budget here. One is, so when you were part of our Lexington team for a bit, you did something called Outstandings and Team Wins. And so I have one last outstanding for you, Richard. Outstanding job. This is what you get for the years, 36 years. This is what you get to you as an outstanding.
Let's make sure we see that on the yes.
This so outstanding job, Richard. Years of ministry.
This just means the world.
But that was what you would always, like every staff meeting, you would try to encourage someone and be like, you did a great job. That was
acknowledge
a culture
and see
shift
and celebrate. Yes.
We needed a few things to celebrate.
We needed a few things to celebrate. Yeah.
Another two things. I know you're going to miss Grace Chapel. And you might already have these things. You probably definitely do. But something to remember Grace Chapel by. One is a book. Not Richard Rhodes' book. Living God's Story, a teaching journey through the scriptures.
There's one favorite chapter I have in here.
Exactly.
Oh, let's check it out.
My chapter.
Your chapter. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's
I love especially chapter 32.
That's the best chapter. That was my favorite chapter.
So if you read this book, make sure you go straight to chapter 32.
That was my favorite chapter as well.
And, are there 3,000 of these left?
I was just going through stuff and I had two of them.
It's very meaningful. Thank you.
John was just going through his bookshelves for the move.
Yeah. As we're moving offices right now.
That touches me deeply.
Yeah. And then another Grace Chapel book that we just want you to remember Grace Chapel. Go, an adventure in kingdom living by the Grace Chapel Go team.
Are you know what? Is that is this a subtle message?
Go, exactly.
Okay, I get it. I'm leaving.
How's this for closure?
I mean,
okay, I'll go.
We all know.
I'll go.
Richard, we all know this is the book.
This is the key word.
We had a lot of those copies left as well.
I noticed.
We all know that as you retire, you're really retiring so that you can golf more with Pastor Doug and enjoy that retirement. So enjoy your retirement, Richard. Any last words you have?
Just you are incredible. Thank you for being a friend, seriously. Mentor, boss, pastor. You you've done, you said before we started 120 funerals, just the way that you have walked with people in some of their deepest times of grief, the way that you have celebrated people, literally it's thousands of lives that you have touched. And to do that, and I think to have the deep respect of so many people who have who work with you and see you in the day-to-day up close.
Thanks.
You are an incredible person. You are an incredible pastor.
Thanks.
And for the rest of my life, you will be in my mind of how would Richard handle this? What would Richard say? And I'm so grateful that I have this storehouse of Richard impact.
Well, that's
in my life.
Very, very meaningful to hear you say that. I don't want to over spiritualize, but I do want to make sure I verbalize that if you saw me in my dependency, and before that, let's say that just the Lexington team, I was on my knees like crazy. I had no idea how to help turn that team around. or form that team and turn it around. And with each of the campuses and all that. And so I do want to acknowledge that God is the only explanation, because I know my own weakness. I know that I've needed him, and I do. If anything's been accomplished, I want to say that God did it. He gave the wisdom, the strength, the energy, the laughter, all of that. He used me. I understand that, and I appreciate that. But to God be the glory.
Amen. Thank you
Amen.
so much, Richard. Really appreciate
And these
it.
gifts
you,
are
Richard.
very meaningful.
Yeah.
So I thank you.
We'll be eagerly waiting part 2 of the Erotic Odyssey until you right into your retirement. So
Yeah, I'm going to write the sequel.
yeah, you're gonna write the sequel.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Thanks for the time, Richard. We love you so much.
Love
Thank
you, Richard.
Love you guys. Thank you.